Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So kick back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from the August 29, 1919 edition. Blaze on pier called firemen Sunday morning. When called out at 2:30 Sunday morning, the firemen were given the surprise of their lives, discovering the recreation pier on fire. Two streams from the chemical extinguished the blaze, which was feeding on two heavy sills about halfway between the seawall and the head of the pier. The sills were close together and the blaze seemed to have a healthy start, indicating that it had been burning for some time. As the fire was under the planking, the firemen are unable to suggest how it originated. There is nothing on the pier that could account for the fire, although several suggestions have been advanced that a carelessly thrown cigar or cigarette or a flounder fire under the dock may have ignited the beams. Tram engine off track. Last Saturday was an unlucky day for the Key Lumber Company, as they had the misfortune to have an engine and 3 boxcars which were filled with cross ties derailed. Owing to the fact that Hastings has experienced some very severe rains, the roadbed gave way, which resulted in a spreading rail. After some hard work, part of the roadbed was fixed and the cars were again on the track. Today, the engine is being run over the tracks to find any other soft place that might give trouble in the future. Date for county bond election is postponed. As soon as it was definitely known that Gould Butler, acting for the county commissioners of St. Johns County in preparation of the specifications for the various road and bridge enterprises contemplated for St. Johns, could not complete his work in time for the commissioners to advertise for bids and award contracts prior to the time originally decided on for the county bond election, the chairman made an authorization to postpone the election. His action has been informally approved by the other members of the board, it being unanimously agreed that the voters of St. John's must be fully informed as to the scope of the improvements and the actual cost for each and every item on the program of road and bridge building. Specimen Road to show how rock will wear. At this week's County Commission meeting, County Chairman A.W. Corbett was anxious to have a practical demonstration made of the new lime rock paving material discovered in St. Johns County, and which it is proposed to use on all new roads. In order to show what this material will do, it was decided to take up 50 feet of brick just north of the city limits on the Dixie Highway and the same length south of the city of New Augustine and relay these sections with lime rock to be graded and oiled exactly as is proposed to be done if the roads are approved in the forthcoming bond election. Another important suggestion made by Chairman Corbett was the designation of the boundary line between St. Johns and Flagler counties. Mr. Corbett had just made a trip down the East Coast and found that the blame for the badly rutted brick on the Dixie Highway in Flagler County is placed on St. Johns, the majority of people being under the impression that this piece of bad road is in St. Johns. A motion by commissioners was formally adopted, authorizing the road superintendent to erect a sign at the county line about 8 by 4 feet in size, with the wording on the St. Johns County side, "Goodbye to St. Johns, come again," and on the Flagler side, "Welcome to St. Johns County, stay as long as you can." Contracted for cinders. City Manager Masters has contracted with the East Coast Hotel Company for the cinders from its several local hotels. The cinders will be used on some of the streets on which traffic is light. This material makes a springy pavement and is capable of standing considerable hard usage. Later, it will serve as a foundation for a rock surface. Road is an auto graveyard. That 2 7/10 miles of unpaved road north of the Tomoka River near Bulow has practically blocked automobile traffic over the East Coast section of the Dixie Highway. The trouble has all been brought about by the collapse of the bridge over the East Coast Canal at Bulow, this bridge being the connecting link between the Knox and Beatty Causeway at the famous Grove and the East Shore Drive along the Halifax River. Commissioner Riley of the Ormond District has ordered to shell the ruts on this 3-mile stretch, but this work has not commenced yet, and in the meantime, there is an awful tale of woe to tell about that terrible black spot. Frank J. Parker and Thomas Passetti reached home Saturday night from a business trip to Indiantown in Mr. Parker's big Cadillac, and the story they have to tell about their experiences at Bulow would not induce any motorist to attempt to get through to Ormond or Daytona. Picture 3 miles of deep sand with innumerable ruts plowed crisscross over the grade, making it resemble no man's land in France. Here and there are stalled cars, abandoned by their drivers who have given up the fight against sand and mosquitoes. Saturday night, Mr. Parker passed 3 such cars and halfway through helped a gentleman and his wife pull their car around and head back for Jacksonville. They were en route to Miami but gave up the trip. Mr. Parker says the folks in Daytona are all wrought up over the situation and that the Chamber of Commerce of that city is going to bring pressure to bear at once to have the paving of this 3 miles completed. Girls to have basketball team. Some of the industrious girls of Hastings have gotten together and are forming a basketball team which will provide some good amusement for those interested and also spectators. They now have a place picked out for a court and are asking the cooperation of some of the good-looking fellows to help them a little bit on the side. Since a basketball court is not of great size, there will be no amount of work required to get the court in shape. Come on, boys, and help them along. They came out to the baseball games and did their part if it was only rooting. From the editorial section. To be commended. The announcement that the St. Johns County Board of Commissioners, of which Amos W. Corbett is chairman, has decided to postpone the proposed bond election for additional paved highways and bridges will be received with general satisfaction, not because it is desired to delay these important improvements, but rather because the people, when they vote, want to have the privilege of coming on a definite amount of money to be expended for a definite amount of work to be performed in a certain designated place. In other words, the voters of St. John's desire to retain the precedent established in 1914, which precedent at the time excited favorable comment throughout the state and was followed by many other counties in submitting bond issues on roads and bridges. It is a simple case of paying for what you get and knowing what you are going to receive. There wasn't a Facebook marketplace in 1919, so instead they used newspaper want ads. So what was being offered up this week in 1919? For sale, 3-horsepower Fairbanks Morse kerosene engine at a bargain. See it at Curtis Garage, Hastings. For sale, 1-horse IHC hay press. Been used very little, but has stood in weather and looks rusty. Have no use for it. Will sell at bargain. G.R. Smith, Bostwick. Orders for homemade sweet or salt butter taken. M.H. Aarons. For sale, 1 Detroit 4-burner oil stove with oven, slightly used but in good condition. Manson Waller, Hastings. Wanted, Cane Mill, must be in good condition and of about 2 horsepower. Address Chris Kilper, Bunnell, Florida. For sale, 1 pair of young mules, good condition, 2 fat hogs weighing 500 pounds, 1 practically new hackney wagon, 4-inch tires, 1 spring-tooth harrow, 1 2-horsepower plow. J. Orville Ecker, San Mateo. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in a modern newspaper, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of its residents. Here are a few from this edition. Returned from trip. Mr. and Mrs. L.O. Larson have returned from a pleasure trip to North Carolina. They made the trip in their car, carrying their camping outfit with them, and they enjoyed the pleasures of a real outing. Showered, but not wet. It has rained pretty steadily for the past several months, but a shower that was appreciated happened Tuesday night when the many friends of Miss Julia Thigpen honored her with all kinds of good things that she will find mighty handy after the one event of every woman's life, that of the wedding ceremony. To say that everyone present enjoyed the occasion would be putting it mildly, for when the clock struck a late hour, the guests were still reluctant to go home. The refreshments were what made everyone wish the clock would stop so that the jollification might last. Inside the cake, a dime, a ring, and a thimble had been hidden, and the lucky finders were Miss Laura Wilson, the ring, Ernestine Gladness, the thimble, and the bride-elect, the dime. The home had been beautifully decorated in pink and green, lending a charming atmosphere of coolness and colors pleasing to all. In case you're wondering about those items in the cake, charms and trinkets in cakes go back as far as the 1600s, with the charms baked into the cake being considered a form of fortune-telling. In this case, the ring indicates the person who is next to get married. The thimble meant that person would be the old maid, and the dime meant the person who got it would have good fortune. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Morello, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time, a 1919 hit, All the Quakers Are Shoulder Shakers, by Miss Isabel Patricola.
I just got back today from a town not far away, and I've been looking at the Quakers in their clothes of gray, and it struck me mighty strange, 'cause there's been an awful change. If you think those folks are slow, there's a lot that you don't know. All the Quakers, the shoulder shakers, down in the Quaker town, things are upside down. The jazz bug bit 'em, Lordy, how it hit 'em. Every wiggle just makes you giggle at the meeting hall. Bands are playing, folks are swaying to the Love and Strutters ball. Brother Halsey with the palsy, why you remember him? He's the man who first began to teach them how to shim. Oh, the home of William Penn won't be quite the same again, 'cause all the Quakers are shoulder shakers down in Quaker Town.
Cynthia, art thou engaged for the next dance?
Nay, William.
Then wilt thou shimmy with me?
Yea, both. It's a most peculiar sight, and it really doesn't seem quite right to see all the Quakers dancing way into the night. When the curfew stops to ring, everybody stops to sing, and they grab their dancing shoes while they hum a Quaker blues. All the Quakers, the shoulder shakers, back in the Quaker town. Things are upside down. The jazz bug bit 'em, whoo, Lordy, how it hit 'em. Every sister is quite a twister of a wicked knee. Baby brother, dad and mother to the Memphis Chivalry. Brother Morgan at the organ, jazz is all the note. Oh, gee, it's simply great to watch them sow their Quaker oats. You should see how Sister Bert does a foxtrot down to church, 'cause all the